Hi there, Malcolm here with my 121st Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my January wrap-up and the second month of the year's TBR. Two great big stacks of books to get through, so let's get cracking. First up was Aliens, the Female War. It's the third and final story of Billy and Wilkes, aka Newton Hicks from Aliens, as we pretend that Alien 3 onwards never happened, and this is the adventures that Hicks and a grown-up Newt go on. And in this one, they meet up with Ripley, and they do some more alien bashing. Like the previous graphic novels of this series, I've already read the novelisation with Steve Perry and S.D. Perry. I really like the books. The graphic novels are okay. They feel a bit thin in comparison, even though they came first. And of the three, the Female War has the greatest deviation between the novel and the graphic novel. It's a good deviation, I liked it, but the thing that really suffered with the Female War is the artwork. It's really poor, and sometimes it's not very clear what's going on. I didn't care for it. So in the end I said, it's boring, nonsensical. Wasn't really engaging because of the bad artwork. And from there, I then moved on to Aliens Stronghold. This is a story I'm not familiar with. I'm not sure how long I've had this book in my collection, but I hadn't read it before. And this one sees a husband and wife team go and visit an installation where they suspect some nefarious goings-on going on. And of course, it's led by some despotic idiot in charge of a bunch of xenomorphs. I expected another by the numbers xenomorph story on the space station. I was pleasantly surprised. This really impressed me, particularly the character of Jerry, who's pictured on the front there, who is an android made to look and sound and smell like a xenomorph, so he can move amongst the xenomorphs in their care. Except he talks, he can smoke cigars and shoot guns. He's a real wisecracker, very sardonic. I could have done with a lot more Adventures of Jerry. I really enjoyed that character. And the story is booktastic. And after that, I then read Scorpio Rising, the 9th book of the Axe Rider series by Anthony Horowitz. I read this to my wife, and at the time when this one was written, it was the final book of the series. I know there's some more that's come out since. We have done our own review on this in another video, so I'll leave a link to that below so if you want to go and find out what we thought of that one. And after that, I then read Superman Aliens. This is a reread. I've read this one a few times now. And in this one, Superman faces off against a bunch of aliens, as the title might suggest. A probe crashes onto Earth, and it seems to have Kryptonian language in it. And he follows the source in space, and he finds a floating city with very few survivors and a whole bunch of xenomorphs. And unfortunately, it's too far away from the sun, so his Kryptonian skin cells start doing their recharging thing, and his power starts ebbing. He still has some. He can still go toe-to-toe with the xenomorph, but it's a bit more of a struggle for him. So, you know, they've nerfed him for the sake of the story. And of course, he's reluctant to kill. He's not a killer. There's a bit of a side story with Lois up on the LexCorp space station and dealing with some xenomorphs that come back there. It's a bit far-fetched, not that the rest isn't, but Superman being able to outrun a xenomorph is believable. Lois Lane being able to outrun a xenomorph, a little less believable. But anyway, the story does dip when it jumps back to her. But when we're with Superman fighting xenomorphs and trying to find out about these Kryptonians, it's really good. And the artwork's nice and colourful. Some of the expressions are a bit wonky occasionally, but I like the art. It's a good, silly, fun one. Booktastic. And after that, I then read January's Book of the Month, Firefly Book 4, The Ghost Machine by James Lovegrove. And being the book of the month, I did a separate video on this one, so I'll leave a link to that below if you want to know what I thought of this one. And after this, I then read some Predator books, because I finished all my Aliens ones. I read this whole omnibus, but I'm counting the collected volumes independently as books, because I get more books that way. And this includes the Schaefer trilogy, starting with Concrete Jungle, going on to Cold War, and then finishing off with Dark River. And I'll review these all in one go, I think, because they are, they feature the same characters, they have the same artwork, and they are pretty much a continuation of the same story. So Concrete Jungle came out at the same time as Predator 2, I think just before, but they were certainly in production at the same sort of time. So I think the two were very much influenced by each other. I think the film was perhaps influenced more by the book. As the name suggests, it takes place in a city, and our main character is a cop. And of course, the predators are hunting in the city. But that's pretty much the only similarity to the film that the two stories have. They do go on very different routes. Detective Schaefer happens to be Dutch's brother, Dutch being Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in the original Predator film, and Schaefer is bigger, tougher, stronger than Dutch, and he's a homicide detective. And of course, when bodies start turning up with their skin and heads removed, he starts investigating and of course finds some big bad hunters. Concrete Jungle has a novelisation which I've already read by Nathan Archer. And I really enjoyed the book, and so going into the graphic novel, I already knew what was going to happen, but really enjoyed seeing it play out on the pictures. Again, it felt a bit thinner than the book, but really enjoyed it anyway. Artwork is very much of the time. It's quite clear, you can see what's going on. A little bit dated perhaps, but no complaints for me really. And certainly Concrete Jungle is booktastic. Cold War sees Schaefer being taken out to Siberia, where a crashed Predator ship is causing a bit of chaos up there, and because of the heat and radiation coming from it, it's causing an international incident, as of course the Americans think that the Russians are up to some nuclear shenanigans up in Siberia. A fun story, although the events following Schaefer's partner from the first book were a little bit far-fetched and unnecessary really, but still really good, and I would say that story is worth buying. And the final instalment was never novelised and has not actually been collected into an official graphic novel, although I'm still counting it as such. It sees Schaefer facing off against one of the predators he thought he'd killed in the first book. He'd merely badly wounded it and it's gone mad. There's also a great promise of a thing in there. I can't give it away for spoiler reasons, but it's being the overlying story for the trilogy, and it really fails to deliver, which was a big disappointment. I suspect at the time of publication they didn't know what the movies were up to regarding this particular detail, so they had to leave it a little ambiguous, but as the movies never went down that path, and the books didn't, it still left unanswered, and that was just annoying because it was the big build-up. I still enjoyed it, it's worth reading. If they were to collect it as an individual binding, it would be nice. If there was to be a novelisation of it, it would also be nice, but certainly the weaker of the three. A strong trilogy with Schaefer versus Predators. And this collection here also contains a few standalone comics that were published, have been collected in here as well. I read those, I'm not going to count them, but they were enjoyable. Lots of clever ideas in them. So after that, I then read The Relic by Lincoln Child and Douglas Preston. This is book one of the Pendergast series, and the first plot of the first duology. This is another reread, and one I hadn't read for over 20 years. Absolutely loved it when I first read it. Absolutely loved it the second time I read it. Been a while since, and I absolutely loved it again. And I used to think the beginning was really good. It dipped in the middle for quite a bit, and then it picked up toward the end. I don't know what I was thinking, because I really enjoyed this all the way through. It gets a bit technical, and maybe that lost me when I was much younger, but no, really strong. It's a monster movie in a book form. A monster's loose in a museum. There's a big show they want to put on, but can they put it on because obviously people are turning up dead, and there's an investigation, and of course things go from bad to worse on the night of this big event. Really great stuff, and a very satisfying read, and I've not read the second book, but I really do want to read it now. Booktastic. And by word of warning, there is a film out of this book. Avoid it. It is not good, unless you like that sort of thing. And then after that, I then read my second ever point horror story, My Secret Admirer by Carol Ellis. Now the first of these I read was Trick or Treat, really enjoyed that one. I thought, okay, I can stick with these. I'm having just finished the Goosebump series, which I've really not enjoyed very much at all. I thought, oh, this is a lot better. My Secret Admirer took a large dip as far as I'm concerned, where it goes to the usual trope of family moves into new house in the middle of nowhere, and the parents then go off on some business trip, leaving their 16-year-old daughter alone to deal with some rather perverted painters and some very weird friends, or very weird local kids. And some stuff happens. She follows every single cliche of a ditzy 16-year-old girl, and the characterisation of her doesn't do her any favours whatsoever. And the mystery was enough to keep me interested in, but the big reveal at the end was a bit, really? You're going with that? So, quite a bit disappointed with this one. I would say it's worth reading, because like I say, the mystery was enough to keep me hooked, but it's not aged well, I think, and Trick or Treat was much better. So, looking forward to the next one being an improvement over what I've just had. And out of that is Predator Helen Hot Water, another one I've had in my collection for a while and not read. No idea why, but I now have. And in this one, a special unit are sent off the southern Chilean coast to go on an underwater expedition to retrieve some predators who are down there hunting. Apparently they like fishing as well as hunting men in jungles and cities. There's a very interesting premise in this one, and I enjoyed it for that aspect, but again, this one really suffered from the atrocious artwork, where there are literally pages of weird panels with no text on them, and it's a case of, okay, just what is going on here exactly? So unfortunately, I'm going to say boring, nonsensical, purely because the pictures don't give the story justice at all. There's also a big twist that is alluded to at the beginning and revealed finally at the end, and you think, well, what is the point of that twist? That twist achieved nothing, and there's further explanation about this big revelation, and you think, well, why? For what possible reason does that even need to be? So I like the book for the idea, but the payoff was a bit of a letdown. And then I read A Wreath of Stars by Bob Shaw, another reread, and again this one was read last at least 25 years ago, and I had very little recollection of what this was about. I knew it was something to do with an antimatter verse or something. In this one, 20 years in the future of when this was written, so that's 30 years ago, somebody invents a special pair of glasses that allow you to see in the dark, which turned out to be really useful. Unfortunately, they have a side effect of letting you to see things that you would normally be able to see, namely an antimatter planet hurtling in an opposite direction. And it's in a different phase of reality, so even when it does pass through the Earth, there's no harm done, but of course it's a bit shocking to see a great big planet in the sky hurtling towards you. However, the result of this wayward planet, shortly after its passage, strange beings start popping out of the ground. Now again, this can only be seen through these lenses, and this is where the story unfolds. Really clever ideas, and I've seen it before in other things, and I really enjoyed this book for that reason. I think some of the characters are there's a few outdated ideas in here about women and about other ethnicities, but if you can look past that, there's a pretty good story in here with some nice science fiction. I really enjoyed it and say it's booktastic, but I can see some people might have a few problems with the attitudes of the characters in here. And after that, I finished reading Vox to my younger son. This is book 2 of the Rook Barkwater sequence from the Edge Chronicles by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddle. And in this one, Rook finds himself lost in the Undertown, trying to survive, and ends up becoming a slave. And it's a survival story, but rather than being in the deep woods or some other crazy place, he's actually in an urban area and a crazy place. Not as good as the first book, and a lot that the first book sets up seems to have been lost quite quickly in this one, but my son really enjoyed it. He loved looking at the pictures, and we've already started book 3, so it's doing something right. Worth reading, and quite fun to read aloud. But again, with this series, it gets dark in places. Don't let cute pictures distract you. This gets dark. And finally, I read Aliens vs Predator. It's the first book in this omnibus. And another one I'd read the novelisation of first. A novelisation which I would say is very faithful to the graphic novel. The novel's Alien vs Predator, Prey. And here we are on the planet Ryushi, where a bunch of Rinth herders, they're like rhinos, but they're cattle basically, are expecting to get paid for their hard work raising these creatures. Unfortunately, the predators have come back after a long time of not being there, and of course the humans have settled there since they've been away, set up a whole bunch of alien eggs ready to hunt when they've hatched and done their thing. Of course they hatch and do their thing, and the poor humans find themselves between xenomorphs and predators. The humans are headed by one Machiko Noguchi, who is a rather standoffish managerial type character until she decides to get out there and show the people how it's done. The artwork is nice and bright and colourful, and you can clearly see who's who and what's going on. So plus marks there. But I would say that having read the novel first, particularly in regards to the predator's culture and behaviours and thoughts, the novel really takes a point of view. Broken Tusk, for example, one of the main predators in the story, and you read about his thoughts and his opinions and what's going on from his point of view. From here, it's all from the human's point of view. You do see the predators, and there's a few panels near the beginning where two humans are talking in the little square boxes in the corner, and we see a whole thing play out on the predator's ship. I only knew really what was going on because I'd read the novel, and that's that scene, that's this scene. But it's just these two are people having an argument, and these predators are getting on with this stuff in the background, if you like. I think reading the novelisation really helped, but I really love the story, and a lot of the elements in it they tried to do in the Aliens vs Predator film. I quite liked the film, but it did fail for me in a lot of ways, particularly when compared to this story, when they tried to do what this did and then failed miserably to do it. They should have done their own thing, really. But I loved it. Booktastic. So that's what I've read. This is what I'm planning on reading. Now, I had planned to read A Darkness at Sethanon by Raymond E. Feist, which is book 3 of the Rift War saga, or book 4 if you've read the first book in 2 halves. But I ran out of month, so I've got to try and finish this one before I can read anything else. I'm nearly halfway. And it's the 3rd of March already, so I really need to get a move on. So in this one, following the events of the first 2 books, there was things I can't tell you about because of spoilers, but there's another attack on the prince, and this time it looks like they've succeeded. And so men are sent off to go and meet with the big bad and hopefully bring him down, and that's their adventure. Looking forward to seeing where this one goes. And for a thick fantasy book, it's pretty easy going. It does help, it's got a nice little summary at the beginning, just bringing me up to speed of what happened before. And when I do eventually finish this, hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll then move on to my book of the month, which is Dry by Neil Schusterman, which is a story about what happens when the water runs out. I don't know much more about it than that, but I really enjoyed his Ark of a Scythe trilogy, so I wanted to try something else by him. Here it is. And after that, I'll then go on to Diamond Mask by Julian May. This is book 2 of the Galactic Milieu trilogy. It's a reread, and I absolutely love this series, so I'm going to enjoy this one. And this tells the story of the character, the Diamond Mask, one of the major players in the upcoming Civil War. Seriously, I can't recommend these books enough. And after that, I'll then move on to Diggers by Terry Pratchett, book 2 of the Bromeliad trilogy. Another reread. In the first book, a bunch of tiny people, like the Borrowers, but they're gnomes, leave a department store before it is demolished and find themselves out in the big wide world. And they settle down in a quarry and try to survive there. But they have another place they need to get to, and being so very tiny does make things very difficult. A very humorous spin on the Borrowers, but it's not a parody, it's using those ideas but taking them into a different direction. A lot of fun, very quick, easy reads, and with a few thick books I would have just gone through, it'll be refreshing to read something a little bit thinner. Once I read that, I'll then move on to Witches Abroad by Terry Pratchett, and this is a Discworld novel, probably one of the first ones I read. Follow the adventures of Granny Weatheraxe, Nanny Og, and Magrat Garlic as they go off to Fawn Parts to stop an evil witch doing evil things. Highly satirical in nature, and this one pokes a lot of fun at a lot of the fairy tales and stories that we tell ourselves. Great stuff, looking forward to reading this one again. Lots of rereads this month. And after that, I'll then move on to Quantum Leap Odyssey by Barbara E. Walton. And these are novels that fit alongside the TV show, featuring our time traveller Sam as he leaps from body to body, making lives all good again, and his holographic friend Al. And in this one, it looks like Sam's jumped into a super intelligent 12-year-old boy. So, interested to see what happens here. Right, so those are the novels I'm wanting to read, the graphic novels. I'm going to continue playing my way through this volume here. I'm currently reading Aliens vs Predator War, which started off with a couple of other stories that were collected into it, but now follows Machiko Noguchi again as she continues her adventures from the first book. And then the final book in here is Eternal. And if I've finished that, I'll then move on to the other Predator and Alien vs Predator books I've got. I'm still reading Star Wars Tyrants Test by Michael P. Kubi McDowell. This is book 3 of the Black Fleet Crisis. It's not a great trilogy by any stretch of the imagination. Book 1 wasn't great. Book 2, 1/3 was brilliant. 1/3 was and 1/3 was downright awful. Making my way through this one. So far it's okay. Actually, it's been pretty good for the most part. There's no matter of time before Luke and that most dreadful Arcana pop up, and then that story, I know, is just kind of taking a nosedive because she's the worst. I was meant to have read this months ago, but still chipping away at it, hoping to finish it before Star Wars comes around again. That should do. While boiling the kettle, I'm still reading The Walking Dead, The Fall of the Governor Part 1 by Robert Kirkbride and J. Bonan Singer. And this one coincides with, I think, volume 8 of the graphic novel series. It's setting it all from a different point of view, and a lot of what happens in the book, in the graphic novel, doesn't feature in the book. It's just mentioned that it has happened, but there are now parallels between the graphic novel and the book, and it's nice seeing where those two meet up. Fun stuff, taking sweet time to get through, because kettles don't boil for very long. I also read to other people in the household. To my youngest, I am now reading Freeglader, which is book 3 of the Rook Bark Water sequence by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddle. It's part of the Edge Chronicles, following the cataclysmic events of the finale of book 2. Can't tell you more than that because of spoilers, but so far so good. To my oldest, I'm still reading Lion Adventure by Willard Price. And to my wife, I'm now reading Orcs First Blood, Legion of Thunder by Stan Nichols. This is book 2 of the trilogy. Read book 1 a couple of years ago now, and so it's nice to come back to this band of orcs, the Wolverines, as they try and collect some more MacGuffins to stop the big bad doing whatever she's trying to do, and find out what these MacGuffins actually do. So it's a nice fantasy story with lots of gruesome fighting in it, and well-told fighting too. A lot of fun. We're planning on reading the next book after this, just to complete the trilogy. So there we go. That was what I've read, and what I'm reading, and what I'm planning on reading. Hopefully all in this month. Shouldn't be too bad, as long as I get a move on what I'm supposed to have finished last month. So if you have any thoughts on any of those books, I'd love to know what they are. Keep your spoilers to yourselves, please, though. And I welcome any other comments as well, as long as they're nice. Because as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you, and until next time, see you later.